Breaking soulmate news, they're finally ready to confess what they've been hiding. My beloved soul, stop for a moment and listen carefully, because if this message has found you today, there is something important your heart needs to hear. There are moments in life when silence says more than words ever could. There are moments when someone may appear distant, calm, unaffected, or even completely detached, while deep inside, they are fighting a battle that nobody else can see. And this message is about that hidden battle. It is about the person whose name may have crossed your mind the moment you saw this title. It is about the feelings they have tried to control, the words they have rehearsed but never spoken, the emotions they have buried beneath pride, fear, confusion, circumstances, and silence. Something is changing. The energy of this connection is shifting. The distance that once seemed permanent may not be permanent at all. The silence that once felt like an answer may actually have been hiding a much deeper truth. Your soulmate has been carrying something inside, and they are reaching a point where keeping it hidden is becoming harder than admitting it. Maybe you have wondered why they suddenly became distant. Maybe you noticed that their behavior changed without explanation. Perhaps there were moments when they seemed incredibly close to you, almost as if they were about to tell you something important, and then suddenly they pulled away. Maybe they watched from a distance. Maybe they checked on you without directly asking how you were doing. Maybe they appeared in unexpected places, reacted to your presence in strange ways, or found small reasons to remain connected even when they claimed they wanted space. You may have wondered whether you were imagining the connection. You may have asked yourself whether their silence meant they no longer cared. You may have questioned whether the feelings were ever real. But there is something you need to understand. People do not always run from what they do not feel. Sometimes they run from what they feel too deeply. Your soulmate may have tried to convince themselves that they could move forward without confronting their emotions. They may have told themselves that time would erase the memories. They may have believed that staying busy would make the thoughts disappear. They may have surrounded themselves with other people, responsibilities, distractions, work, entertainment, social situations, or even another relationship in an attempt to silence the voice inside them. But when the world becomes quiet, the truth becomes louder. And that is where they have been meeting you again and again. Not necessarily physically, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. When the noise disappears, your memory returns. When they are alone, they remember conversations. They remember your eyes. They remember your kindness. They remember something you said that they once ignored. They remember the way you made them feel when they were not pretending to be someone else. There is a reason certain connections remain unforgettable. Some people enter your life and leave almost without a trace. Others leave a mark so deep that even after months or years, one small song, one familiar place, one sentence, one photograph, or one unexpected memory can bring everything back. Your connection may belong to that second category. It may have been complicated. It may have been delayed. It may have been interrupted. It may have been filled with misunderstandings. But complexity does not automatically mean the connection was meaningless. Your soulmate has been hiding something. And the hidden truth may be much simpler than your mind has allowed you to believe. They still care. They still wonder about you. They still have questions. They still have emotions they have not completely resolved. And most importantly, they may finally be reaching the point where pretending otherwise is no longer working. There was a time when they thought silence gave them control. They thought if they did not speak, they could avoid vulnerability. They thought if they did not admit what they felt, they would not have to deal with the consequences. They thought distance could protect them. But distance has a strange way of revealing what closeness sometimes hides. When someone is constantly around you, they can become distracted by ordinary life. But when you are no longer there, the absence becomes noticeable. Your soulmate may have discovered that your absence is louder than your presence ever was. They may have looked around and realized that not everyone understands them the way you did. Not everyone notices the small changes in their mood. Not everyone remembers the details. Not everyone makes them feel safe enough to lower their guard. Not everyone challenges them while still caring about them. And perhaps that realization has been uncomfortable. They may have asked themselves why they keep comparing other connections to what they experienced with you. They may have wondered why they cannot simply forget. They may have even become frustrated with themselves. They may have said, "Why am I still thinking about this person?" They may have tried to force an answer that made sense logically. But emotions do not always follow logic. Your soulmate may be experiencing a conflict between what their mind says and what their heart keeps repeating. Their mind may say, "Move on." Their heart may say, "But what if this was real?" Their mind may say, "It is too complicated." Their heart may say, "Then why does it still matter?" Their mind may say, "They have probably moved on." Their heart may say, "Then why am I still hoping?" That internal conflict is exhausting. And eventually, people become tired of fighting themselves. That may be why this confession energy feels different. They are not necessarily preparing to make a dramatic declaration overnight. Sometimes a confession begins quietly. It begins with a simple message. A small question. A reaction to something you post. A casual excuse to start a conversation. A sudden appearance. A mutual friend mentioning something. A simple, "How have you been?" that carries far more meaning than the words themselves. Do not underestimate small beginnings. Someone who has been afraid to reveal their feelings may not suddenly become fearless. They may approach slowly. They may test the emotional temperature. They may want to know whether you are still receptive. They may be afraid of rejection. They may worry that too much time has passed. They may wonder whether you are angry. They may fear that you have found someone else. They may even fear that admitting the truth will change everything. But something inside them is pushing against the silence. And that is the important part. They are getting tired of hiding. They may have replayed the past many times. They may remember a particular moment when they should have spoken but didn't. They may remember a chance they allowed to pass. They may remember something they said that hurt you. They may remember when you were available and they were emotionally unavailable. They may remember when you gave them an opportunity and they responded with confusion, distance, or pride. Regret can be powerful. There is a difference between missing someone and realizing you mishandled something precious. Your soulmate may be entering that realization now. Perhaps they thought you would always be there. Perhaps they believed you would keep waiting. Perhaps they assumed they could return whenever they wanted. But something changed when you stopped chasing, stopped explaining, stopped proving yourself, or simply began focusing on your own life. Your silence may have spoken louder than all your previous words. They may have noticed that you are different now. Maybe you are not reacting the same way anymore. Maybe you are no longer trying to force communication. Maybe you have stopped checking for signs. Maybe you have become more peaceful. Maybe you have begun rebuilding your confidence. And that shift may have made them realize that they cannot depend on your constant availability. Sometimes people understand your value when they realize they no longer have automatic access to your attention. That does not mean you should play games. It means you should continue honoring yourself. If someone truly wants to return, let their actions speak. You do not need to chase a confession. You do not need to beg someone to admit what they feel. You do not need to convince anyone that your connection mattered. Your role is not to force another person into emotional honesty. Your role is to remain grounded, protect your peace, and allow truth to reveal itself through consistent actions. And your soulmate may be learning that lesson too. They may be realizing that if they want another chance, they cannot simply appear with vague words and expect everything to return to the way it was. They may need to explain. They may need to apologize. They may need to acknowledge what happened. They may need to admit that they were afraid. They may need to tell you that the distance was not necessarily because they stopped caring. Perhaps they were overwhelmed by the intensity of their feelings. Perhaps they were afraid of commitment. Perhaps they were dealing with circumstances they did not know how to explain. Perhaps their past experiences taught them to run whenever something became emotionally serious. Perhaps they were afraid that loving you would make them vulnerable. And vulnerability can terrify people who have spent their entire lives trying to remain emotionally protected. Your soulmate may have a strong exterior. They may appear confident. They may act as though nothing affects them. But sometimes the strongest looking people are the ones who struggle most with emotional exposure. They may have learned to hide sadness. They may have learned to avoid difficult conversations. They may have learned that asking for love is weakness. They may have learned that trusting someone creates the possibility of being hurt. And so when you came into their life and awakened feelings they could not control, they may not have known what to do. Instead of moving closer, they moved away. Instead of explaining, they became silent. Instead of admitting fear, they acted indifferent. Instead of saying, "I care about you," they may have said things that suggested the opposite. And perhaps that is one of the greatest misunderstandings in your story. Their behavior may not have accurately reflected their emotions. But listen carefully. Understanding someone's fear does not mean you must accept poor treatment. You can have compassion without abandoning your standards. You can recognize someone's struggles without allowing them to repeatedly hurt you. You can love someone and still choose yourself. That is important. Because if this connection is truly meant to become healthier, it cannot be built on endless waiting, guessing, and emotional uncertainty. A real confession must eventually become real communication. A real feeling must eventually become responsible action. And your soulmate may finally be approaching that realization. Something has matured inside them. Maybe circumstances forced them to grow. Maybe losing access to you taught them something. Maybe another experience showed them what they were taking for granted. Maybe they experienced disappointment elsewhere. Maybe they realized that attention is not the same as connection. Maybe they discovered that attraction is not the same as emotional safety. Maybe they learned that having options does not mean having the person who genuinely understands you. And now their thoughts are returning to you. Not because they are bored. Not because nobody else is available. But because there is something unresolved in their heart. There is a conversation that never happened. There is a truth that never came out. There is an apology that was never given. There is an emotion that was never properly expressed. And that unfinished emotional story may be why this connection continues to occupy their mind. They may be imagining what it would be like to see you again. They may wonder what they would say. They may rehearse different versions of the conversation. Sometimes they imagine being confident. Sometimes they imagine telling you everything. Sometimes they imagine apologizing. Sometimes they imagine simply standing in front of you and admitting, "I never stopped caring." But then fear returns. What if you reject them? What if you have moved on? What if you no longer feel the same? What if you ask questions they cannot answer? What if you remind them of everything they did wrong? What if you tell them that they waited too long? Those questions may be holding them back. But fear is not always permanent. There comes a moment when the pain of silence becomes greater than the fear of speaking. Your soulmate may be approaching that moment. And when it comes, the confession may not look exactly like a movie scene. It may be imperfect. It may be awkward. It may begin with a simple message. It may take several conversations. They may struggle to find the right words. They may start and stop. They may say one thing and then reveal something deeper later. Do not judge the sincerity of a person solely by how beautifully they speak. Watch whether their behavior becomes more honest. Watch whether they become more consistent. Watch whether they respect your boundaries. Watch whether they take responsibility. Watch whether they stop disappearing when emotions become difficult. Those are the signs that matter. Because anyone can say, "I miss you." But rebuilding trust requires action. Anyone can say, "I love you." But love becomes meaningful when it is accompanied by respect, accountability, patience, and consistency. Your soulmate may be learning this now. Perhaps they once believed that simply having feelings was enough. Now they may understand that feelings must be handled responsibly. They may understand that if they truly want you, they cannot keep you trapped inside uncertainty. They may need to choose clarity. And clarity is coming. The hidden feelings are becoming harder to hide. You may notice changes in communication. You may notice more openness. You may notice them becoming curious about your life again. They may ask questions they avoided before. They may want to know whether you are seeing someone. They may want to know how you have been feeling. They may bring up memories from the past. They may mention places you once visited together. They may casually refer to something only the two of you would understand. These little details can be emotionally significant. But remember, do not obsess over every sign. Let the person show you. You do not have to decode every message. You do not have to turn every coincidence into a prophecy. Your peace is more valuable than constant interpretation. If they are ready to confess, they will eventually have to communicate clearly. And perhaps that is exactly what is changing. They are moving from indirect behavior toward direct communication. They are moving from hiding toward honesty. They are moving from fear toward courage. They are moving from thinking about you toward actually doing something about what they feel. That is the transformation. And it may have started because you changed. You stopped being the person who constantly waited for an answer. You began becoming the person who could live without one. That changed the entire emotional dynamic. When you stop begging for someone's attention, you give them the opportunity to decide whether they genuinely want to give it. When you stop chasing, you can finally see who walks toward you. When you stop forcing, you can observe what happens naturally. And if they are truly ready, they will move. Your soulmate may have realized that your heart cannot remain available forever. That realization can create urgency. Not desperate urgency, but emotional clarity. They may be thinking, if I don't say something now, I may lose this person completely. That thought can be powerful. Because sometimes people do not fear losing someone until they realize the person has learned how to live without them. You may have reached that point. And they may have noticed. They may see your strength. They may see that you are not the same person they once knew. You have grown. You have become more selective. You have learned that love should not require you to abandon yourself. And that growth may be exactly what makes the next stage different. If they return, they may meet a version of you who has standards. A version of you who wants clarity. A version of you who wants mutual effort. A version of you who does not accept half-truths. A version of you who can say, I care about you, but I also care about myself. That is not coldness. That is maturity. And your soulmate may need to meet you at that level. They cannot expect the old version of you to return. The old dynamic may have served its purpose. Now something healthier must emerge. If they confess, listen carefully. Do not immediately give away your power. Do not immediately assume everything will be perfect. Allow them to speak. Allow the truth to come out. Ask questions if you need answers. And then observe. Because the most beautiful reunion is not simply two people finding each other again. It is two people returning with greater emotional maturity. It is two people understanding what went wrong. It is two people deciding not to repeat the same patterns. It is two people choosing honesty over games. That is the kind of connection worth building. Your soulmate may finally understand this. They may have spent enough time in silence. They may have discovered that avoiding the conversation did not erase the feelings. It only postponed the truth. And now the truth is demanding attention. Maybe they have already written a message and deleted it. Maybe they have opened your profile and closed it. Maybe they have typed your name into a search bar. Maybe they have asked someone about you. Maybe they have looked at old photographs. Maybe they have listened to a song that reminded them of you. Maybe they have sat alone and wondered what could have happened if they had made different choices. These moments may be happening privately. You may never know about them unless they tell you. That is why you should not live your life waiting for invisible signs. Live your life. Let them come forward if they are ready. The truth does not need you to chase it. The truth eventually reveals itself. And if their feelings are real, they will have to confront them. There is something else you need to understand. Your soulmate may not have been hiding only love. They may have been hiding regret. They may regret how they handled you. They may regret their silence. They may regret allowing outside opinions to influence their decisions. They may regret listening to fear. They may regret choosing temporary comfort over emotional truth. They may regret believing that you would always wait. And regret can create courage. At some point, a person realizes that saying nothing also has consequences. Silence is a choice. Distance is a choice. Avoidance is a choice. And your soulmate may finally understand that every choice created a consequence. They may now want to choose differently. That is why this confession feels important. Not because someone is magically obligated to return. Not because you should stop living your life. But because hidden emotions often reach a breaking point. When someone carries a truth for too long, eventually